Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in linguistics. I am Pramod Pandey at the Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We are at module 17 of the paper on Introduction to Phonetics and Phonology. The title of this module is Phonemic Analysis. In this module, we will be concerned with the main issues, assumptions and concepts of phonemic analysis and the crucial theoretical and analytical issues. The purpose is to build some sort of a foundation in phonological analysis. Phonology. The study of the structure and function of speech sounds in a language is as much needed as the study of the physical properties of speech sounds. We have focused so far on the study of the physical property of speech sounds. We will now to consider the structure and function of speech sounds. The structure and function of speech sounds is often determined by the physical properties of speech sounds. For example, most languages do not allow two or more plosives to begin a word. By two or more plosives we mean sounds such as bada, ka, etc. Now most words don't begin with two plosives. Now what could be the reason? The reason seems to be purely physiological. It is difficult to maintain a contrast in the two plosive sounds at the beginning of words. Similarly, all the languages of the world have words that end in vowels, but not all the languages of the world have words that end in consonants. Now what could be the reason for this difference in the words ending in vowels and ending in consonants? The reason appears to be more physical. It is difficult to maintain a contrast between consonants at the end of words because there is a loss of energy. It requires much more physical effort to distinguish between consonants when they occur at the end of words, whereas distinguishing between vowels is easier at the end of words. Thus, the structure and function of sounds are often dependent on physical properties of sounds. What do we study in phonology? In phonology, we attempt to investigate the following. A. The units of phonology which constitute the phonological structure of a language. B. Constraints on the distribution of the phonological units, also known as phonotactic constraints. C. Alternation between related forms. For example, the forms of the word sane, insane, and sanity. D. The relation of phonological structure to morphological, syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic structures. Now the main objectives of phonological analysis are twofold. Number one, to describe the phonological structure of a language using the descriptive tools of analysis aimed at identifying phonological units and their patterning. Two, to provide an explanation of phonological knowledge that underlies the production and comprehension of speech using specific phonological theories. These are the two main objectives of phonological analysis. Now, a phonemic analysis of a language is concerned with identifying the contrastive units in the sound system of a language and their systematic variants. Its aim is thus more limited than the aim of phonological analysis. Thus, its aim is more restricted than the aim of phonological analysis in general. Now, what is the need for phonemic analysis? A phonemic analysis is needed for the following purposes. It is needed for the use of unambiguously interpretable alphabet for the linguistic analysis at other linguistic levels, namely morphological, syntactic, and semantic. It is needed for the documentation and preservation of endangered languages that do not have a writing system. It is needed for the development of writing systems for unwritten languages. It is needed as a prerequisite for the growth and development of research on language technology solutions in the fields of speech synthesis and speech recognition. Without phonemic analysis, it is not possible to fulfill the aims as mentioned above. Phonemic analysis thus has two main objectives. Number one, to discover the alphabet of phonemes in a language, and number two, to arrive at generalizations regarding the environments in which the phonemes of a language occur. These are the two main concerns of a phonemic analysis. Now, before we proceed to introduce ourselves to the main concepts and terms of phonemic analysis, we would like to be familiar with the main assumptions in phonemic analysis. These assumptions are the following. A. Phonological systems have representations consisting of discrete units. This is an assumption with which a phonemic analysis is carried out. Why is it necessary to state this assumption? Because the experimental evidence shows that speech occurs in a stream. It is not often easy to distinguish the different segments as speech sounds. But for the sake of phonemic analysis, we assume that segments exist in spite of them occurring in a stream. For illustration, consider two words in Hindi. One, til, which means sesame seed, and two, dil, which means heart. When we get these two words, what we find is that we can easily identify them as having 4 segments in total. So in til we have ta, I and la. In dil we have da, I and la. Together we have 4 segments, ta, da, la and I. This illustrates what we mean by the fact that phonemic analysis assumes that segments occur. The second point which is important with regard to the occurrence of segments is that let us not assume that the segments are all perceived as in the same way in different languages. Students of phonetics must realize that although segments and sequences of segments may occur in almost identical shape and form in 2 languages, the speakers of the languages may perceive them differently. What do we mean by this? What we mean by this is that given a sequence, for example, a sequence of 2 sounds b, v, as in English obvious, a speaker of English sees them as 2 sounds, 2 segments, v. However, in another language, such as the Tibeto-Burman language Kheza, the v is actually seen as 1 sound, an affricate v, v. There are similar sounds like f. Now in English, f are 2 different segments, p and f, occurring one after another. But in Kheza, these are treated as a single segment. So the sequence, although the speech is divisible into segments, but their interpretation as 1 or 2 or different segments or similar segments depends on the speakers of the language. The second important assumption is that languages have unique phonemic systems. This is a very, very important point. Often the students of phonetics who have knowledge of one language assume that the segments which occur in two languages are of the same importance. But that is not really so. When we look at here sounds of English and sounds of Hindi, we find that there are many sounds which are common. For example, Hindi has p, p and b, bh. English has p, p. It doesn't have a bh. But when we look at the sounds p, p in English and p, p in Hindi, on close analysis, we will find that whereas in English, p, p are perceived as two variants of one sound, but in Hindi, p, p are perceived as two independent sounds. So on the surface, we have two sounds occurring in English and Hindi, but on analysis, what we find is that p, p constitute one contrastive unit in English, p, p constitute two contrastive units in Hindi. Thus, the analysis of sounds of one language should not be carried out in relation to the analysis of sounds in another language. We assume that every language must be analyzed in its own terms. The phonemic chart of the two consonants, p, p in English and Hindi, is shown to you on the screen. The third assumption in phonemic analysis is this, that sounds are affected by the environments in which they occur. Now consider the different pronunciations of the diphthong I and of the consonant L in English on your screen. Notice that the diphthong I in the set A has two other pronunciations in these words, a shortened I and a nasalized I, in addition to I. Both the shortened and the nasalized forms of the diphthong are affected in these cases by the following sounds. We will go into greater detail about the context in which these diphthongs appear at a later stage, but we notice contexts such as the difference between a d and a t and a nasal ng. Look also at the pronunciation of l in the set B. There are at least three different forms of l, like, will, and played. So we have a velarized l and a voiceless l in addition to the normal l. These illustrate the assumption that sounds are affected by the environments in which they occur. What is the use of this assumption in phonemic analysis? The use is that two sounds which are phonetically similar may be the same sound, one which is different because of the context. It's also likely that two similar sounds are totally different sounds. But unless we assume that sounds may be affected by the environment in which we occur, we may wrongly conclude that two sounds are different sounds. So this is an important assumption in carrying out phonemic analysis, as we shall see the role of context in deciding on the phonemic status of sounds. The fourth assumption that we have in carrying out phonemic analysis is that speech sounds have two levels of representation. one level that is called the surface phonetic level. This is the level at which all the phonetic properties of sounds are represented as far as possible. In addition to the surface phonetic level, there is the underlying representation level, which deals with only the contrastive sounds of a language. Thus, given the word pin and spin, the two words are on the surface represented in the way you see on the screen. The underlying representation of the words is different. Some of the phonetic properties which are predictable, such as aspiration, nasalization, are not present in the underlying representation because these are predictable. They occur in given contexts, such as a p can be aspirated at the beginning of words, or a vowel is nasalized before a nasal consonant. So these two features are purely surface phonetic features, whereas the consonants p, I and n are the ones which are contrastive with the language, and thus the underlying representation is at the level of the contrastive units. Now we turn to the basic concepts in phonemic analysis. The most important concept to begin with is environment. What is environment? The environment of a speech sound is what precedes it and what follows it. The environment includes segments as well as non-segments, such as pause, represented with the hash symbol, or morphological boundary, represented as a plus symbol. Now, because words are separable by pauses, a hash also indicates word boundary. The environments for the sounds in the word book are thus presented as such. The environment for U is a preceding B and a following K. The environment for B is a preceding word boundary and a following U. The environment for K is a preceding U and a following word boundary. Thus, the environment consists of what precedes and what follows it. The second important and related concept is distribution. What is distribution? Distribution is the totality of the environments in which a sound or a set of sounds occurs. Now, given below are some of the environments in which a consonant or a vowel, such as p, l, e or a, may occur. Take a look at them on the screen. So, word initial context, word final context or environment, between vowels, following a vowel, preceding a vowel, before a consonant, following a consonant. All these are environments in which sounds may occur. Now, take a look at the words in which the sounds p and p occur in English. The next important concept in phonemic analysis is phone. A phone is any speech sound. We look at the phones of a language in the first attempt at phonemic analysis, following a record of the speech sounds of the language. Let us take a look at examples from Kashmiri. Here we have a list of Kashmiri words on the screen. Take a look at them in terms of all the consonants and vowels. Having taken a look at all the consonants and vowels that occur in the words in Kashmiri, we list them as follows. The consonants are T, R, Th, D, B, t, t, d, g, gu, g, 12 in number, and the vowels are a, I, o, u, a, 6 in number. So we make a list of the phones before we attempt at any phonemic analysis. Only after we have listed all the phones that we want to investigate the relationship among the phones. Are they variants of the same sound, or are they totally different sounds? Once we have identified all the phones, then we come to the next concept, the most crucial concept in phonemic analysis, namely the phoneme. A phoneme is defined as the minimal unit of sound that contrasts two words. We have seen many words above that qualify as phonemes. For example, Hindi, the and the in dil, heart, and til, sesame seed. Pita, which means drinks, and pita, which means ribbon. Kashmiri ta and tha in bati, which means tail, and bati, which means dent. And again, ta and da in the words bati, which means tail again, and badi, which means good, great. Now, minimal contrastive units are quite easily identifiable in English. For example, pa and ba in pin and bin, sa and sha as in see and she, a and I as in Spain and spine, etc. Thus, a phoneme is seen as the minimal contrastive unit in the sound system of a language. There are other ways in which we look at the phoneme. Another way in which we look at the phoneme is as an abstract unit with concrete manifestations like the letters of alphabet. Consider the various forms of a letter of the English alphabet. The way the English alphabet is written in small and capital letters, and the way it is printed in small and capital letters are quite different from each other. And yet, somehow, we think that each one of them manifests a letter, a given letter. Let us say the letter A. So the letter A stands as an abstract unit. Each one of the forms of A is a concrete manifestation. A phoneme is like an abstract unit, and each of the pronounced forms is a manifestation of the abstract unit called a phoneme. The last and the final concept that we are going to consider as important in phonemic analysis is the concept of allophone. An allophone is a variant of a phoneme that is predictable in given environments, or that is totally in free variation with another sound. For example, the sounds p and p, we know, are variants of a single phoneme, p. There are languages in which two sounds may always be in free variation. For example, in Arabic spoken in the country Yemen, the sound j is always in free variation with g. They are not different sounds. We then say that j and g are allophones, like p and p are allophones in Arabic and in English respectively. So in this module, we started with trying to relate the study of phonology to that of phonetics by showing how the structure and function of sounds is dependent on the physical property of speech sounds. We then next tried to explain what the objectives of phonology, a theory of phonology is, or a phonological analysis is. And we saw that the objectives of a phonemic analysis come within the range of the objectives of phonological analysis as a whole. In this module, we introduce then the most important assumptions of phonemic analysis, such as phonemes, all the speech sounds are affected by the environments, each language has a unique sound system, etc. Finally, we looked at the important concepts in phonemic analysis, such as the environment, the distribution, phone, phoneme, and allophone. We move on in the next module to look at the methods and techniques of phonemic analysis. Thank you.